The sun was barely breaking through the gray clouds that had hung over Suffolk for the past 3 days. I sat at the window, watching the few passers-by going about their business in the drizzling rain. My old hands, covered in stains and wrinkles, rested motionless in my lap. 77 years of life had left their marks: scars from working with the sharp blades of combines, calluses from endless hours behind the wheel of heavy machinery, chapped skin from sun and wind. My name is Thomas Hackett. I've been a combine operator all my life. Not the most prestigious profession, but I was proud of my skills. In the fields around Suffolk, I was known as the man who could harvest the crop faster and cleaner than anyone else. Farmers specifically waited until I was free to trust me with their fields. For 42 years I had gotten up before dawn, had breakfast, and headed out into the fields, returning home only as the sun set, smelling of wheat and diesel fuel. Now my days were filled with silence. 3 years ago, I sold my last combine to Wilfred Spencer, a young man I had once trained to work with. Got a good sum of money, which I set aside for a rainy day. Thought it would help me and Eleanor spend the rest of our lives in peace and quiet. Eleanor, my Ellie, we've been together 52 years. We met when I was 23 and she was 20. She worked at the library and one day brought me lunch right into the field. Her father owned the farm I was working on at the time. She appeared in a white dress with a basket like a vision among the golden ears. 6 months later, we were married. I still remember her laugh, tinkling like a silver bell, and her hands, always smelling of vanilla because she loved to bake cookies. Our house was always filled with that smell. Even now, sometimes I think I can smell it when I wake up in the morning. Eleanor died 2 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. It happened so quickly. From the first symptoms to her last breath was only 4 months. I didn't even realize what was happening. And then there was just emptiness and silence. Our house, once filled with life, now seemed huge and empty. The old photographs on the walls, her chair by the fireplace, the books on the shelves, everything reminded us of her. But nothing could fill the void her death had left. We only had one daughter, Mercy. Weird name, I know. Eleanor insisted on it, said it was from an old book she read when she was pregnant. I agreed because I could never say no to Ellie. Mercy is 46 years old. She works as a manager for an insurance company. Married Gareth Caldwell 15 years ago. They have 2 children, my grandchildren Zach and Emily, age 14 and 11 respectively. They live in the Suffolk suburbs in a large house overlooking the river. Since Eleanor's death, our relationship with Mercy has been strained. No, they were never particularly close. Mercy had always been an ambitious girl, striving for more than Ellie and I could give her. Ashamed that her father was a simple combine harvester with calloused hands and the smell of the fields. I'd noticed it when she was a teenager, the way she crinkled her nose when her friends came over to our house, the way she tried not to invite them into our humble home. Eleanor said it was just adolescence, that all children go through it. But as the years passed, the estrangement only grew. Mercy went off to university in another city, and from then on our meetings were rare and formal. When Eleanor died, Mercy came to the funeral. She cried, of course, organized everything from the church service to the wake. It was perfect, like everything Mercy does. And then she left, leaving me alone in an empty house. In the weeks after the funeral, she called almost every day, asking how I was doing, if I needed anything. Then the calls became less frequent, once a week, once every 2 weeks, once a month. Now she only calls on holidays or when she needs something. I don't blame her. She has her own life, her own worries. Work, husband, kids. Who needs an old man with his memories and his ailments? But sometimes I get bitter, especially when I see my former colleagues spending time with their children and grandchildren. George Payne, with whom we started working together back in the 70s, goes fishing every Sunday with his son and grandson. And Henry Baxter, An old buddy of mine went to live with his daughter after his wife died. He says he's happy to be surrounded by family. I, on the other hand, had only rare visits from Mercy and her family, usually at Christmas or my birthday. They'd come for a couple of hours. The kids would awkwardly hug me. Gareth would shake my hand and talk about the weather, and Mercy would bustle around the kitchen preparing a meal that hardly anyone would eat afterwards. After these visits, I felt even more alone. It was as if they came not because they wanted to see me, but because they felt it was their duty. About a year after Eleanor died, Mercy suggested I sell the house and move in with them. Said she was worried about me, that I shouldn't live alone at my age. I said no. I couldn't imagine leaving the house I'd lived in most of my life, where every corner reminded me of Ellie. It was the first time I'd ever seen real irritation on Mercy's face. She wasn't yelling, no. My daughter never raises her voice. But her voice turned cold and her eyes became hard. "Dad, you're becoming a stubborn old man. This house is too big for you alone. You don't do a good job of cleaning. I can see dust on every surface, and you need supervision." I said no again. Said I had hired a woman who came to clean twice a week, that I have neighbors who help if needed, that I was doing just fine on my own. Mercy left with a slammed door. A week later, she came back with some paperwork from the lawyer, said she was worried about my finances, that I might be a victim of fraud. She offered to give her power of attorney to manage my accounts and assets. I signed it. Not because I was afraid of scammers or couldn't manage my money. I just wanted her to stop pressuring me. I wanted some peace. From then on, Mercy controlled all my finances. She sent me a fixed amount every month, barely enough for groceries and bills. If I needed extra money, I had to ask her for it, explain what I'd spend it on, like a child asking for pocket money from his parents. Once I asked her for money for a new TV. The old one was broken and the TV was my only entertainment during the long evenings. Mercy said it was a waste of money, that my old TV could be repaired. When I countered that it would cost almost as much to repair as a new one, she replied irritably, "Dad, you don't understand the value of money. You've always been a spender. It's a good thing I control your finances now, or you'd have blown all your savings by now." That wasn't true. I had always been a frugal person. Ellie and I put every penny aside to make sure Mercy got a good education, so she could go to the university she dreamed of, so she could have what we never had. But I didn't say anything. I didn't want to fight. After all, she's my daughter, my blood, the only family I had left. And then the health problems started. Minor ones at first. Dizziness in the morning, joint pains worse than usual. I put it down to age. At 77, it's hard to expect to feel like you did when you were younger. But one morning when I got out of bed, the room suddenly spun around me. I lost my balance and fell, hitting my head on the bedside table. I woke up on the floor in a pool of blood from my split forehead. I struggled to get to the phone and called my neighbor, Mrs. Parker. She called an ambulance and called Mercy. To my surprise, Mercy arrived almost immediately, even before the ambulance arrived. She looked worried, which was unusual. She came with me to the hospital, sitting next to me while the doctors examined me and stitched up my wound. The doctor, Dr. Abbott, insisted that I be examined. He said that dizziness at my age could be a sign of serious problems. He ordered tests and scans. Mercy agreed to all the procedures without asking about the cost, which was unusual for her. I thought then that perhaps she really did care about me, that despite our estrangement, she still loved her old father. After I was discharged from the hospital, she insisted that I spend a few days at their house. She said I needed supervision. I agreed, albeit reluctantly. Mercy and Gareth's house was large and modern, minimalist design, lots of glass and metal, not a single extra thing. Everything was perfectly clean and neat. I was assigned a guest room on the first floor, small but comfortable. For the first 2 days, Mercy was attentive, bringing me food to my room, asking if I needed anything. Even Zach and Emily stopped by to see me, albeit briefly. Zach showed me his new video game, and Emily told me about a school science project. But on the third day, the atmosphere changed. I heard Mercy and Gareth arguing in the kitchen. They were talking quietly, but in the stillness of the night their voices were clearly audible through the thin walls. "How long is he going to be here?" Gareth asked. "We can't keep him forever." "I know," Mercy replied. "But what am I going to do? He can't live alone. You saw what happened." "A nursing home, then, or a caregiver." "A nursing home costs money, a lot of money." "He has savings and a house. Sell his house, it'll be enough for a good nursing home for many years." "He won't agree to sell the house. You know how stubborn he is." "Then convince him. You are his daughter, after all." There was a pause, and then Mercy said, "I'll try. But not right now. We have to wait for the results of the exam. Maybe it's not that bad and he can come home." The next day, I insisted on going back to my house, said I was feeling much better and that I didn't want to be a burden. Mercy didn't mind much, which confirmed my suspicions. Her concern wasn't so much for my well-being as for the possibility of getting my house. Back home, I thought seriously about my future for the first time, about what would happen if my health continued to deteriorate, if I really couldn't live on my own. The thought of a nursing home terrified me. I've seen places like that. Sterile hallways, the smell of drugs and disinfectants, the empty eyes of old people sitting in chairs in front of TVs. No, it's not for me. And a week later, the test results came back. Dr. Abbott called and asked me to come to the hospital. He said he wanted to discuss the results in person. I could tell by the sound of his voice that the news wasn't good. That evening, I sat at the window for a long time, looking outside. The rain had intensified into a torrential downpour. The drops beat on the glass like little drummers. I thought about Eleanor, about how much she loved the rain, how we used to sit together on the veranda, covered in plaid, and listen to the sound of the rain. "Rain washes away all the bad things, Tom," she used to say. "The world is always cleaner and fresher after it rains." I hope she was right, that this rain would wash away my fears and doubts, that tomorrow the world would be cleaner and fresher. But deep down, I knew that change was coming, and not all of it would be for the better. The morning was clear but cold. I struggled to get out of bed, every bone in my body screaming in pain. Mornings like this had become a regular occurrence lately, especially after that conversation with Dr. Abbott. The test results were not so surprising to me. Severe heart failure, arterial hypertension, early onset Parkinson's. My list of diagnoses sounded like a verdict. Dr. Abbott, a tall man with graying temples and kind eyes, spoke softly but directly. "Mr. Hackett, you'll need a steady regimen of medication and regular monitoring. Your condition can be controlled, but you need to begin treatment immediately." I sat in his office, clutching the armrests of the chair so hard my knuckles turned white. Mercy sat next to me, her face pale and tense. "How much is this going to cost?" was the first thing she asked after a long silence. Dr. Abbott gave an approximate monthly cost for medications and procedures. Mercy bit her lip and frowned. I could see the numbers rolling around in her head as she mentally counted my savings, figuring out how many months it would last. "Insurance will cover some of the cost," Dr. Abbott said, noticing her reaction, "and there are programs to help elderly patients." Mercy nodded, but I could see she wasn't reassured by that. To her, my health problems were primarily a financial issue, not because she was concerned about my well-being, but because it threatened her plans for my savings. After my appointment with Dr. Abbott, my life became an endless series of pills, blood pressure readings, and pain. Every morning I woke up with one thought: today would be better than yesterday, and every night I'd go to bed realizing I'd fooled myself again. Mercy stopped by once a week to drop off my meds and check on me to see how I was doing. Always in a hurry, always looking at her watch. Half an hour and she'd be at the door saying she was late for an appointment, that the kids were waiting, that Gareth had asked her to come back early. On one of these visits, I tried to talk to her about my condition, about how I was finding it increasingly difficult to cope on my own, that maybe I needed help, not every day, but at least a couple times a week. Someone to help with cleaning, with cooking, with shopping. A caregiver? Mercy raised her eyebrows. Dad, do you know how much a caregiver costs now? I didn't know, but I realized I couldn't do it on my own anymore. My Parkinson's disease was progressing. My hands were shaking more and more, especially in the mornings. I couldn't hold a mug of tea without spilling half of it. And yesterday I dropped a bowl of soup, and I didn't have the strength to clean up the splinters. I sat there until Mrs. Parker came to check why I wasn't answering my phone. I can pay for the sitter out of my savings, I said to Mercy. I should have something left over from the sale of the combine. Mercy pursed her lips and looked away. Dad, your savings. They're not as big as you think they are anymore. Medications, bills, house taxes, all of that costs money. And then, you were the one who wanted to do the roof repairs last year. I didn't remember asking for roof repairs. My house was old, but sturdy. Ellie always made sure everything was in order. Show me the bank statement, I asked. I want to see where my money is going. Mercy sighed with a look of martyrdom. Dad, you're the one who handed over financial management to me, because you have a hard time dealing with numbers, remember, and now you don't trust me. She had a knack for making me feel guilty. She always had. Even when she was a little girl and asked for a new doll or dress, she'd look at me in a way that made me willing to give my last shirt just to see her smile. Of course I trust you, I said quietly. I just want to know what I have left. I'll send you a statement, Mercy said, looking at her watch. Now I really have to go. Emily is performing in the school play tonight. I can't be late. She walked away, leaving me with the bitter feeling that I wasn't being taken seriously, that my requests were being ignored like a child's whims. She never sent the transcript. When I reminded her about it on my next visit, she said she had forgotten, that she was very busy at work. She promised to send it the following week. And again, she didn't. In the meantime, my condition was worsening. Now the trembling in my hands was joined by trembling in my legs. It was getting harder and harder to walk. I began to use the cane that Eleanor's father had once given me. It was a good old oak cane with a silver lion's head on the end. Eleanor always said it made me look like an English gentleman. Now it was a necessity, not an ornament. Dr. Abbott said I needed regular physical therapy, that it would help slow the progression of Parkinson's, but the clinic was downtown and I couldn't drive myself anymore. The buses were infrequent and getting to the bus stop across the block was an impossible task for me. I asked Mercy to drive me to my treatments, twice a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays. She agreed at first, but after the third time, she started making excuses. There was a meeting at work, or Emily was sick, or the car was in the shop. Take a cab, Daddy, she said. I'll wire you the money. She transferred money irregularly and in smaller amounts than needed. And when I called her to remind her, she always made excuses. She forgot, or there was an urgent expense, or the banking app wasn't working. I didn't know if it was true or not, but it was getting harder and harder to believe what she was saying, especially when I saw her new car, her expensive clothes, heard about her vacation in France last summer. None of this spoke of financial hardship. Eventually, I started skipping procedures. Dr. Abbott would call, asking why I wasn't showing up. I would make excuses, saying I had a cold or that I had other things to do. I was ashamed to admit that I just couldn't get to the clinic and that my own daughter was refusing to help me. One day, when the pain in my joints became particularly unbearable, I did make up my mind and called Mercy. It was about 10 o'clock at night and I realized I was calling too late, but I needed help. I couldn't get out of my chair. I couldn't walk to the bathroom to get some painkillers. Gareth picked up the phone. His voice sounded annoyed, like I'd interrupted something important. "Thomas, what's wrong? Why are you calling so late?" I tried to explain the situation, but he interrupted me. "Mercy isn't home. She's at a corporate event. She'll be back late. Maybe you should call an ambulance if you feel so bad." No, I don't need an ambulance," I hastened to assure him. "Just thought Mercy might stop by, help me get to the bathroom." At this hour, there was disbelief in his voice. "Thomas, it's late. We have kids asleep. Mercy can't snap and drive across town just because you need to go to the bathroom." I felt the color of shame flood my face. He was right, of course. I shouldn't have called this late. I shouldn't have asked for something like this. "I'm sorry," I said quietly. "I'll manage on my own." "Good," Gareth said, clearly relieved that the conversation was coming to an end. "Mercy will stop by tomorrow to check on you. Make sure you're okay." He hung up without waiting for my response. That night I sat in the chair until morning. The pain gradually subsided, but it wasn't completely gone. In the morning, Mrs. Parker came in. She often came to see me in the mornings, bringing fresh bread or pie. When she saw me in the chair, with eyes swollen with sleeplessness, she splashed her hands. "Thomas, what's the matter? Did you sit up all night like that?" I nodded, unable to speak. She helped me to the bathroom, then made tea and brought me breakfast. "You need help, Thomas," she said, looking at me with concern. "Constant help. You can't just live like this, hoping the neighbor will drop by." I knew she was right, but I didn't know what to do. My savings, according to Mercy, were melting away. A nursing home wasn't an option. I loved my home too much, my independence, however illusory it was now. "Maybe we should talk to your daughter," Mrs. Parker suggested. "She could hire a nurse, or spend more time with you herself." I shook my head. "Mercy's busy. She has a job, a family. I don't want to be a burden." Mrs. Parker snorted. "A burden? Thomas, you're her father. You raised her, took care of her. Now it's her turn to take care of you. It's not a burden, it's a duty." But I knew Mercy better than that. I knew I'd been a burden to her for a long time. A problem to be solved, an expense to be cut. Mercy didn't arrive until the next day, toward evening. I didn't bother to tell her about spending the night in the chair. I didn't want to feel helpless again, to hear the irritation in her voice. She brought me some medicine and some groceries. She looked tired and irritated. When I asked her about the corporate party, she answered briefly. "It went well. We drank, danced." I wanted to ask her about my finances, how much was left in my account. But I didn't dare. I was afraid to hear that I had almost no money left, that I would soon have to sell my house to pay for medicine and food. Instead, I asked, "Mercy, could you take me to Dr. Abbott tomorrow? I have an appointment, and I haven't been to physical therapy in a while." She sighed. "Dad, I can't tomorrow. Emily has rehearsal, and I promised I'd drive her, and then I have a meeting with a client." "How about Gareth? Or you could call me a cab." "Gareth's away on a business trip, and cabs are so expensive right now." She fell silent, as if considering something. "You know what? I'll reschedule your appointment for next week, and I'll drive you myself." I nodded, even though I knew she'd find an excuse next time, too. It had happened more than once. After she left, I sat at the window for a long time, looking out at the street. It was starting to get dark, the streetlights were still on, and the world outside seemed gray and dull. I thought about how my life had changed in the last few months, how I had gone from being an independent man to a helpless old man, dependent on the mercy of my own daughter, a daughter who seemed to be just waiting for me to finally give up and agree to sell the house. It had been 3 weeks since Mercy had promised to take me to Dr. Abbott. In that time, she had rescheduled the visit twice and finally stopped returning my calls about it altogether. I didn't insist. I accepted that there was nowhere to go for help. Mrs. Parker came by almost every day, brought me groceries, helped with the cleaning, cooked dinner. Without her, I would have been lost. She was the one who insisted I call a cab and go to the doctor's office on my own. "Thomas, this is getting out of hand," she said, frowning. "Your daughter doesn't care about you at all. If you need money for a cab, I'll lend it to you." I was embarrassed to accept help from my neighbor, but I saw no other option. My condition was getting worse every day. My tremors became worse, and sometimes I couldn't even hold a spoon. The pain in my joints was constant. I didn't sleep well at night and often woke up with my heart pounding like crazy. That Thursday, Mercy dropped by unexpectedly, without warning, around 5 in the evening. I was sitting in my chair by the window when I heard a car pull up. Her brand-new silver Volvo gleamed in the evening sunlight. Mercy entered without knocking. She had a key. She looked excited and happy at the same time. I hadn't seen her like that in a long time. "Daddy," she exclaimed, kissing my cheek. "How are you? You don't look so good." I shrugged. "I've been better. Haven't seen you in a while." She pretended not to notice the reproach in my words. Walking into the kitchen, she put the kettle on. "I've got great news, Dad," she said, pulling cups out of the cupboard. "I've been offered a promotion at work. Regional life insurance manager. Can you believe it? The salary is almost double." "Congratulations," I said. "You've always been motivated." She smiled, satisfied. "But there is one condition. I have to take a training course in Switzerland, a 2-week course in Zurich. I have to pay all the expenses myself. The company will reimburse them only after successful completion of the program." I was beginning to see where she was going with this, and I didn't like it. "And when is this training?" I asked, trying to keep my voice sounding neutral. "In 2 weeks." She sat down across from me with a cup of tea. "Dad, I need your help. The training costs £8,000, plus flight, accommodation, on-site expenses. It's about $12,000 in total." I was silent, waiting for him to continue. "I thought," Mercy continued, looking me straight in the eye, "that I could take the money out of your savings account. You don't use it anyway. And this is such an opportunity for me. After the promotion, I can pay it all back with interest." "What about my medical treatment?" I asked quietly. She frowned. "What do you mean?" "Dr. Abbott was talking about an experimental treatment for my Parkinson's disease. It could greatly improve my condition." "Oh, that," she waved her hand. "Dad, it's an experimental treatment. There are no guarantees, and it's probably costing an awful lot of money." £20,000 for the course," I said. "I found out." She whistled. "You see, 20,000, that's just crazy. You realize you don't have that kind of money, right?" "I do have savings, about 30,000 after selling the combine, plus a pension." Mercy looked away. "Dad, there's something I have to tell you. Your savings, they're not as big as you think." "What do you mean?" "Well, all those expenses, medications, bills, roof repairs last year." "What roof repairs?" I interrupted. "I don't remember any repairs." She was visibly nervous. "You don't remember? Last spring. A leak after a heavy rain. Had to call the handyman." I didn't remember anything like that. Yes, my memory failed me sometimes, but not to that extent. And then Mrs. Parker would probably mention the repairs. She noticed everything that happened on our street. "How much is on my account now?" I asked bluntly. Mercy got even more nervous. "I won't say exactly. About 15,000 maybe." 15? But how? Where did the other 15 go? Dad, I'm telling you, expenses. Do you think medicine is cheap? And house taxes? And utility bills? Everything is getting more expensive every day. I shook my head. Something didn't add up here. Even with all the expenses, £15,000 over 2 years was too much. "I want to see the bank statement," I said firmly. "Now." I don't have it with me. Mercy stood up, clearly about to leave. I'll bring it next time. And about the training money. You're not going to turn me down, are you, Dad? This is such a chance for me, for our whole family. I looked at her and didn't recognize her. My daughter, my flesh and blood. When did she turn into this cold, calculating woman? When did she stop seeing me as a father and start seeing me as a source of money? I'll think about it, I said finally. I need time. She nodded, but I could see in her face that she wasn't satisfied with my answer. Okay, Dad, but I need to know by the end of the week. Otherwise, the training spot will be given to someone else. After she left, I sat for a long time looking out the window and thinking. Something in her story about the savings kept bugging me. I decided to check it out. The next morning, overcome with pain and weakness, I got dressed and hailed a cab to the bank. I needed to know the truth. At the bank, I was greeted with surprise. An elderly man who could barely walk with a cane was not the usual weekday visitor. A young female employee sat me down in a chair and politely asked how she could help. I want to know the status of my account, I said. All of my accounts. She nodded and asked for identification. When I held out my passport, she entered the data into the computer and frowned. Mr. Hackett, she said after a pause, a power of attorney has been executed in your name for the management of all accounts, in the name of Mercy Caldwell. Yes, my daughter, but I have a right to know the status of my accounts, don't I? Of course you do, she smiled. We'll check everything now. She turned to the computer again, and after a minute she handed me a printout. Here's your main account statement for the last 3 months, and your savings account too. I took the papers with trembling hands and began to study the numbers. What I saw stunned me. There were only £230 in the main account. The savings account had just over $2,000. That was all that was left of my $30,000, but that wasn't the most shocking part. On the statement, I saw regular transfers to another account, large sums between £500 and £3,000 every few weeks. The recipient was an account in the name of Mercy Caldwell. These transfers, I said, pointing a trembling finger at the lines on the statement. Where are they going? The employee glanced at the screen. This is Mrs. Caldwell's personal account. Apparently, she regularly transfers money from your account to hers. I felt a wave of anger rising inside. Mercy wasn't just controlling my finances. She was systematically taking my money, my savings that I'd been saving all my life, money that was supposed to provide me with a decent old age to pay for my medical treatment. When was the last transfer made? I asked, trying to speak calmly. The employee looked at the statement. Last night, a transfer in the amount of £12,000. Last night, right after her visit to me, she didn't even wait for my reply. Just took the money. I thanked the employee and walked out of the bank feeling devastated and betrayed. Mercy, my only daughter, had robbed me. Took all my savings without caring that I needed money for medical treatment, for basic survival. I came home in a strange state. Inside, I was a storm of emotions, anger, resentment, frustration. But outwardly, I was calm. It was as if a part of me had died the moment I saw those numbers on the bank statement. I sat down in my chair by the window and called Mercy. She didn't answer right away, her voice sounding annoyed. Yes, Dad? I'm at work. Lots to do. I was at the bank today, I said quietly. Saw the account statement. There was a pause, a long, hard one. Dad, I can explain. What can you explain? I interrupted. That you took all my savings? That you've been lying to me all this time? I didn't lie. Her voice became hard. I managed your finances like you asked me to. Yes, I've taken money for family needs, but it's your family too, isn't it? Family needs? I felt the anger rising in me again. A new car? A vacation in France? Designer clothes? Those are family necessities. Don't be dramatic, Dad. I deserve a good life. And training in Switzerland is an investment in the future, including yours. When I get promoted, I'll have more money. I'll be able to take better care of you." "What about my medical treatment?" I asked. "Dr. Abbott said there was a chance to improve my condition, but now I don't even have money for regular medication." Mercy sighed with obvious irritation. "Dad, you're 77 years old. What's the point of spending insane amounts of money on experimental treatments? It'll just delay the inevitable." Her words hit me like a slap in the face. I felt my breath catch. "Are you saying I shouldn't get treatment? That it's time for me to die?" "I'm not saying that," she snapped back. "But we have to be realistic. You're old and sick. And I have my whole life ahead of me. The kids have their whole lives ahead of them. Your money will do more good if it's spent on us than on useless treatments for you." I remained silent, stunned by her cruelty. "Besides," she continued, clearly annoyed by my silence, "I am your daughter, your only heir. That money will still go to me when you die. What difference does it make, now or later?" "The difference is that I'm still alive," I said quietly, "and I need treatment." "Your treatment is not my problem, not yet," she blurted out, and then immediately faltered as if she realized she'd gone too far. I felt something snap inside me. The last thread that bound me to my daughter had broken. In that moment, she became a stranger to me. "I hear you, Mercy," I said calmly. "Have a good time in Switzerland," and hung up without waiting for her response. All evening I sat in my chair without turning on the light, immersed in my thoughts. Mrs. Parker came in and brought dinner, but I hardly touched my food. She noticed my condition, but she didn't question me. Just sat next to me in silence until I asked her to leave. In the morning I made a decision. If Mercy thinks she can just take my money because she's going to inherit it after I die anyway, well, that's not going to happen. I'll change my will. I called a cab again, but this time I didn't go to the bank, but to a lawyer. A small firm on the outskirts of town that Mrs. Parker had recommended. Her nephew worked there as a paralegal. I was met by Mr. Blackwood, an older man with a neatly trimmed beard and attentive eyes behind glasses. He listened to my story without interrupting, only occasionally making notes in his notebook. "Mr. Hackett," he said when I had finished, "what you describe sounds very much like financial abuse. Your daughter used the power of attorney not for your benefit, but for her own. That could have legal consequences for her." "I don't want to sue her," I said. "I just want to change the will and revoke the power of attorney." He nodded. "That's your right. But I have to warn you, your daughter can contest the new will after you die, especially if you disinherit her completely. The court may decide you were incapacitated or under duress." "I'm not going to disinherit her completely," I said. "I just want the bulk of my estate to go to someone other than her." To whom then? I wondered. I had no other close relatives. There were no friends I could trust with my inheritance, except Mrs. Parker, I said, my neighbor. She's been taking care of me for the last few months, doing more than my own daughter ever did. Mr. Blackwood wrote down the name. Good. And how do you want the property distributed? The house and everything in it to Mrs. Parker. Mercy let her get 10% of the sale of the house, no more. And the other assets, bank accounts? I grinned bitterly. They're practically non-existent. Mercy took almost all of my savings. I see, he made another note. We can prepare a new will today, but it will need 2 witnesses to make it valid. Do you have someone in mind? I shook my head. Mrs. Parker couldn't be a witness since she was the beneficiary of the will. Don't worry, Mr. Blackwood said. My assistant can be one of the witnesses, and for the other, we can have a secretary from a neighboring office. It's perfectly legal. While Mr. Blackwood prepared the documents, I sat in his waiting room, pondering how I had come to this life. How is it that my only daughter has betrayed me to the point where I have to disinherit her? Eleanor's words came to mind. She had always said Mercy was too ambitious, too selfish. She thinks only of herself, Tom, she'd once said. And that's our fault. We've spoiled her too much, allowed her too much. I didn't want to listen then. I didn't want to believe that my little girl could grow up to be that kind of person. But Ellie was right. She always was. An hour later, Mr. Blackwood invited me back into the study. On the desk was a document, my new will. "It's all ready, Mr. Hackett," he said. "I have entered all your wishes. Please read it carefully before you sign it." I read each word slowly. The document was clearly and plainly written. Mrs. Parker was receiving the house and all its contents. Mercy, 10% of the sale of the house should Mrs. Parker decide to sell it. "That's right," I said as I read to the end. "Where do I sign?" Mr. Blackwood pointed to a line at the bottom of the page. "Here, and put today's date." I took the pen and signed. My hand trembled, but not from sickness, from the realization of what I was doing, disowning my own daughter. After me, witnesses signed, a young man whom Mr. Blackwood introduced as his assistant and a middle-aged woman, a secretary from a nearby office. "That's it," Mr. Blackwood said when the formalities were completed. "This is now your official will. It supersedes all previous versions." "And what about the power of attorney?" I asked. "I want to revoke it as soon as possible." "We'll need to prepare a separate document for that," he said, "and you'll have to notify the bank. I can help with that." We spent another hour formalizing the revocation of the power of attorney. When it was done, I felt strangely relieved. It was as if a heavy weight had fallen from my shoulders. "Mr. Blackwood," I said, rising to leave, "I would like you to inform Mercy of the new will. I'm not sure I can do it myself." He nodded understandingly. "Of course. I'll send her a formal notice, but I must warn you she'll probably be very upset." "I know," I said, "but it's her problem, not mine." As I uttered those words, I felt a bitter irony. I'd used almost the exact same words I'd used with Mercy in our last conversation. "Your treatment is not my problem yet." But the difference was that I wasn't refusing to help my daughter in her time of need. I just didn't want her to profit from my death after refusing to help me in my lifetime. Leaving the lawyer's office, I walked slowly down the stairs, leaning on my cane. A light rain was drizzling outside, but I took my time seeking shelter. I stood with my face to the drops and thought about Eleanor's words. "Rain washes away everything bad, Tom. The world is always cleaner and fresher after it rains." I hoped she was right, that this step I took today would wash away the bitterness and resentment from my heart, that I would be able to look to the future with renewed hope, even if that future did not include my daughter. The 3 days after my visit to the lawyer passed in a strange calm. I didn't call Mercy. She didn't call me. It was as if there was an invisible wall between us, and no one dared to make the first move to break it down. Mrs. Parker came by every day, bringing food, helping with the cleaning, sometimes just sitting next to me while I watched TV. She didn't ask about Mercy, though she must have noticed her absence. And I didn't talk about what I'd done, wasn't ready to share it even with her. On the 4th day, the phone rang. My cell phone vibrated on the table by my chair and I saw Mercy's name on the screen. My heart skipped a beat. Had Mr. Blackwood already contacted her? "Yes," I answered after the 5th ring when I realized she wasn't going to give up. "Dad," her voice sounded strange, strained. "I need to talk to you. I'll be there in an hour." She hung up without waiting for my response. Didn't ask if I was comfortable, didn't ask how I was feeling. Just put me on the spot. Mrs. Parker was just at my place, making dinner in the kitchen. I didn't tell her Mercy was coming. Didn't want to create an awkward situation. When she finished her lunch and was about to leave, I just thanked her for her help. "I'll stop by tonight, Thomas," she said, buttoning her coat. "Maybe we can watch together that show we started last night?" I nodded, feeling a prick of conscience. She didn't know she was about to become the primary heiress to my entire estate. Didn't know I was using her kindness as a weapon against Mercy. Mercy arrived exactly 1 hour later, 1 minute to the minute. I heard the car pull up, the door slam. Then there was a sharp knock on the door. Not a bell, a bang. It was as if she no longer felt entitled to come in uninvited. I rose from my chair with difficulty, leaning on my cane, and slowly went to open the door. Every step was painful in my joints. The medication I'd been taking wasn't working as well as it used to. Mercy stood on the doorstep, pale and tense. In her hand she held an envelope, the same one Mr. Blackwood was supposed to send. "May I come in?" she asked coldly. I stepped aside, letting her pass. She walked into the living room without taking off her coat, as if she had no intention of lingering. "What's this?" She tossed the envelope onto the coffee table. I walked slowly back to my chair and sat down, feeling my legs shake from the exertion. "You know exactly what it is, Mercy. You've already read it, haven't you? I want to hear from you." Her voice shook with barely contained anger. "I want to hear you explain this madness." I sighed. "It's a new will. I changed it after I found out you took all my savings, after you told me my treatment wasn't your problem. And you decided to disinherit me?" She raised her voice. "Your only daughter? Blood by blood? For the sake of some neighbor girl?" "Mrs. Parker isn't some neighbor," I said calmly. "She's been taking care of me for the last few months, doing what you're supposed to be doing. I'm working. I have a family, kids. I can't sit with you all day." "I didn't ask you to sit with me all day. I just asked you to help with my treatment, take me to the doctor, make sure I had the medication I needed." "And I did help." She splashed her hands. "I came every week, bringing medicine, groceries." "And then she took all my savings and flew to Switzerland," I said quietly. She fell silent, turning away to the window. Then she said, without looking at me, "I returned the money, all 12,000 of it. It's back in your account." It was unexpected. I didn't think she'd return the money, especially after being so eager to get it for her training. "Why?" I asked. She turned around and I saw tears in her eyes. "Because I didn't go to Switzerland, turned down the training, decided your health was more important." I couldn't believe my ears. "You turned down a promotion? For me?" "Yes." She wiped her tears with the back of her hand. "But apparently that means nothing to you. You've already decided that I'm a bad daughter, that I don't deserve even a fraction of your inheritance." Something in her words, in her tone, made me uneasy. It was like she was playing a role, acting out a play to make me feel guilty. "When did you return the money?" I asked. She frowned. "Yesterday, or the day before yesterday. What difference does it make?" "After you got the notice from Mr. Blackwood." She averted her gaze. "It might have been. I don't remember exactly." So that was it. She didn't return the money out of concern for me, but out of fear of losing her inheritance. Thought if she returned what she'd stolen, I'd change my mind. "Mercy," I said tiredly, "let's be honest with each other, at least for now. You didn't return the money because you're worried about my health. It's because you're afraid of losing the house." "That's not true." She raised her voice again. "I'm worried about you. You're my father." "Then why did you say my treatment wasn't your problem? Why did you take the money, knowing I needed it for my medication?" She was silent, biting her lips. Then she said quietly, "I was upset. I said it without thinking. You know what my temper is like. Hot-tempered like yours. More manipulation. Again trying to make me feel guilty, like it was my fault she'd grown up like that." "Mercy," I said, looking her straight in the eye, "I know you wanted me to sell the house, to move into a nursing home, to free up that property for you." "That's not true," she was almost shouting. "I was suggesting you move in with us, to live with us." "You offered, knowing I would refuse, knowing how attached I was to this house, and then you started manipulating my finances so I had no choice." She turned away, crossing her arms over her chest. "You're paranoid." An old, sick paranoid. You see conspiracies where there aren't any. Her words hurt, but I didn't show it. Instead, I said calmly, I've been to the bank, Mercy. Saw the statements. Saw all the transfers you made from my account to yours. That's not paranoia. These are facts. She was silent, still not looking at me. You know, I continued, I didn't want to believe for a long time that my own daughter could do this to me. Wrote it off to a misunderstanding, to you being busy. I convinced myself that you just didn't understand how important treatment was to me, how important this house is. I paused, gathering my thoughts. But now I see the truth. You've always been like this, selfish, thinking only of yourself. Even as a child, when you demanded new toys, new clothes, not caring that your mother and I had to save money on everything. That's not true. She turned around, eyes burning with anger. It is true, Mercy. Eleanor saw it. She always said we spoiled you too much, that you'd grow up selfish. I didn't want to believe it, but she was right. Mercy walked over to me, hovering over the chair. Don't you dare drag Mom into this. She loved me. She understood me, unlike you. She loved you, I agreed. But she saw you for who you were, and worried. Worried that when we were gone, you'd be alone, because people who think only of themselves are left behind in the end. Mercy recoiled as if I'd hit her. You're a monster. How can you say that to your own daughter? I'm telling the truth, Mercy, probably for the first time in years. I've always gone along with you, always giving in. Thought it was my way of showing love, but it wasn't love. It was weakness. I was afraid of losing you like I lost Eleanor. She looked at me, and in her eyes was a mixture of anger, resentment, and surprisingly fear. It was as if for the first time she saw me not as a weak, dependent old man, but as a man capable of standing up for himself. You're out of your mind, she said quietly. Completely out of your mind. It's all a disease. You don't know what you're saying. I know exactly what I'm saying, I replied. And I know exactly what I'm doing. I'm not changing the will, Mercy. You'll get your 10%, no more. The rest will go to the man who really cared for me in my time of need. She stood with her fists clenched, as if fighting the urge to punch me. Then she turned abruptly and headed for the door. You're going to regret this, she tossed over her shoulder. When you're alone, when your precious neighbor is tired of fiddling with you, you'll regret it. But it'll be too late. She slammed the door so hard the panes in the windows shook. I heard the engine of her car start, the tires shrieking as it sped away. And I stayed in the chair, feeling a strange emptiness inside, as if something important, something valuable had been ripped out of my life. But along with the emptiness came relief. It was as if the heavy weight I'd been carrying all these years had finally fallen from my shoulders. In the evening, Gareth called. His voice sounded tense, official. Thomas, it's Gareth. Mercy told me about your conversation and about your decision about the will. And what do you think of that, Gareth? I asked, not expecting sincerity. He was quiet for a moment, as if choosing his words. To be honest, I was shocked. Not so much by your decision, that's your right after all, but by the effect it had on Mercy. I've never seen her in such a state. Is she upset? Upset is not the right word. She's a wreck. Cries, can't calm down. Says you said terrible things, that you always hated her. I sighed. Typical Mercy, exaggerating, twisting my words, presenting herself as the victim. I didn't say I hated her, Gareth. I just told the truth about our relationship, about how she's treated me over the years. She says she cared for you, that she did everything she could. She took all my savings, Gareth, the money I needed for my treatment, and said my treatment wasn't her problem. That's a concern? He fell silent again. I could almost hear the gears turning in his head as he tried to find justification for his wife's actions. Look, Thomas, he said finally, Mercy may have acted wrongly, but she paid the money back, and she does care about you. Maybe you could. Reconsider your decision for the sake of the family. What family, Gareth? I asked tiredly. The one that comes to see me once a month for half an hour? The one that thinks I'm a burden? The one that waits for me to die so it can get the house? That's not fair, Thomas. We're not waiting for you to die. We want you to be with us as long as possible. Then why did Mercy refuse to help me with the treatment? Why did she say it was a waste of money? He didn't answer. Mercy probably hadn't told him that part of the story. Look, Thomas, he said after a pause. Let's not make any hasty decisions. Maybe you should come over to our house for dinner. Talk calmly, without emotion. The children miss you. The children? I couldn't hold back a bitter chuckle. Gareth, I haven't seen Zach and Emily in 3 months, not since Christmas, and then they spent a mere 15 minutes with me before running off to their gadgets. They're teenagers, Thomas. You know what they're like at that age. I know, I said. And I also know that kids learn from their parents. They see how they treat the older generation, and they adopt that attitude. Gareth sighed. Well, I can see there's no use talking now. You're too upset. Maybe in a few days, when the emotions have settled. It's not emotion, Gareth. It's a decision I've made after much thought, and I'm not going to change it. I understand, his voice grew colder. In that case, I have nothing more to add, except that Mercy is your only daughter, and you risk losing her forever. I've already lost her, Gareth. Years ago. I just didn't want to admit it. After talking to Gareth, I couldn't sleep for a long time. I tossed and turned in bed, thinking about what I'd said, about what had happened between me and Mercy. Had I been too harsh? Maybe, but I'd also been honest. For the first time in years. Mercy called this morning. I hadn't expected it after last night's scene. Her voice sounded calm, almost detached. Dad, I've been thinking about our conversation, about what you said, and I've decided you're right. I was so surprised that I didn't find anything to say in response. I really wasn't. Not the best daughter, she continued. Perhaps I've been selfish, didn't pay enough attention to you, and for that, I apologize. Something in her tone alarmed me. It was too smooth, too perfect, like a memorized speech. I'd like to rectify the situation, she said. I wish we could start over. Maybe you could come over for lunch on Sunday. The kids would love to see you. Mercy, I said, trying to speak softly. I appreciate your apology, but I think we both need time to think things through, to figure out if we can really start over. But you're not ruling out that possibility, are you? A note of hope slipped into her voice. I'm not ruling it out, I said, but I don't promise to change my will. There was a pause, a long, heavy one. Then she said, and her voice changed, became hard. So that's what you're worried about. The will, the money, not the relationship with me, not the grandchildren, but the money. No, Mercy, Don't bother, she interrupted. I've got it all figured out. You've never loved me, always preferred Mom, and now you've found a replacement for her, that neighbor of yours. Well, so be it. But don't expect me to come crawling to you on my knees begging for forgiveness. I took the first step. I apologized. And you're just a cruel, selfish old man. And she hung up without waiting for my response. I sat there, holding the silence phone in my hand, feeling strangely numb. It was as if all the emotions had been drained out of me, leaving nothing but emptiness. In the evening, Mrs. Parker came in, brought dinner as usual. She noticed my condition, but didn't question me. She just sat by me while I ate, talking about little things, the weather, the new store that had opened on the corner, her sister who was coming to visit next week. Her presence was soothing. There was none of Mercy's demanding nature about her, no ulterior motives. She just took care of me because she thought it was the right thing to do, because she was a kind person. Mrs. Parker, I said as she was about to leave, there's something I have to tell you. She stopped at the door, looking at me questioningly. I've changed my will, I continued. And I've left most of the property, including the house, to you." She looked at me stunned. "To me? But why? I mean, you have a daughter, grandchildren." "Mercy doesn't deserve this house," I said. "Not after what she did to me. And you've been kind to me when no one else has. You deserve it." Mrs. Parker shook her head. "Thomas, I can't accept that. I didn't help you for an inheritance. And then what will your daughter say? She'll think I manipulated you." "Mercy already knows," I said. "And I don't care about her opinion anymore. I've made my decision, and it's final." Mrs. Parker looked confused and concerned. "Thomas, think carefully. This is a serious step. Maybe you should talk to your daughter again. Try to mend the relationship." "I've tried," I said tiredly. "Many times. But some relationships can't be mended. Some bridges are burned forever." She looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. "I understand. But I still think you should think again about the will. This is your home, your life. It should stay in the family." After she left, I sat at the window for a long time, looking out at the street, at the slowly descending dusk, thinking about what Mrs. Parker had said, about family, about bonds that should be stronger than resentments and disappointments. But the truth was that there hadn't been a real family bond between Mercy and me for a long time. There was only form without substance, rituals without love, and maybe I really was as much to blame for that as she was. That night I dreamt of Eleanor. She stood in the garden behind the house, among her favorite roses, and smiled at me. "You did what you had to do, Tom," she said. "Sometimes you have to let go in order to move on." I woke up with a sense of peace, like I had received a blessing from the only person whose opinion really mattered to me. And the next morning the kids called. First Zach, then Emily. Both of them spoke tautly, as if they were memorized text. They asked how I was feeling, said they missed me, that they'd like to come visit. But there was no sincerity in their voices, just the fulfillment of duty. I realized Mercy was using the kids as her last bargaining chip, trying to put pressure on my feelings by using the grandchildren. It was low, even for her. "Guys," I said when Emily finished her memorized speech, "I know your mom asked you to call me, and I realize you're doing it in good faith. But let's be honest with each other. Your mom and I had a fight. We had a big fight. And these are grown-up problems that we have to deal with on our own, without you." "But Grandpa," Emily's voice trembled, "Mom says you don't want to see us anymore, that you've cut us out of your life." "That's not true," I said softly. "I will always be happy to see you. I will always love you, no matter what happens between me and your mom." "Then why did you disinherit us?" Her voice grew harsher, and in it I heard Mercy's intonation. "I didn't disinherit anyone, Emily. I just decided to leave the house to the person who took care of me when I was sick." "To that old woman? Instead of your own family?" I sighed. Apparently Mercy had already managed to turn the kids against me, instilling in them that I'd betrayed my family by choosing some old woman over them. "Emily," I said, trying to speak calmly, "when you grow up, you'll realize that family isn't just about blood ties. It's caring, supportive, loving. And sometimes strangers show more of those qualities than family." "Are you saying your mom doesn't love you? Doesn't care about you?" "I'm saying that relationships can be complicated, and they don't always work out the way we want them to." "You're just an angry old man," she shouted, and hung up the phone. I sat staring at the silenced phone and felt the last thread that connected me to my family severed. Mercy had turned even the kids against me, used them as weapons in our war. It was over, a final and irrevocable breakup. And as painful as it was, I knew it couldn't be otherwise. Some relationships just can't be healed. It had been a month since I'd last spoken to Emily. A month of silence. No calls from Mercy, no visits from Gareth, no messages from the grandchildren. It was as if I'd been erased from the family history, forgotten, like an unwanted item abandoned in the attic. The silence was depressing at first. I caught myself listening to the sound of approaching cars, flinching at phone calls, expecting to hear my daughter's voice. But gradually I got used to it. I humbled myself, and in that resignation I found a strange calm. Mrs. Parker came by every day, just as she had before, but now she was sometimes joined by her sister Eleanor, who was visiting from Brighton, a full, vivacious woman with a loud laugh and an endless supply of stories from her turbulent youth. They brought dinner, helped with the cleaning, and sometimes just sat in the living room with me, watching TV or playing cards. Eleanor turned out to be an avid card player and taught me a few games I'd never even heard of before. "Thomas, you're hopeless," she laughed when I once again lost. "But don't worry, you still have time to learn. I'm not leaving until I've made you a worthy opponent." Her optimism was infectious. Next to her, I felt younger, more energetic. Even the pain seemed to recede when the room was filled with her laughter. But the biggest change in my life came from Dr. Abbott. After regaining control of my finances, I approached him again about an experimental treatment for Parkinson's disease. "The treatment is still available," he said, looking at my chart. "But I'm afraid the cost has gone up. It's now £25,000 per course." I sighed. I only had 14,000, 12 that Mercy had paid back and another 2 in a savings account. "Are there any assistance programs?" I asked. "Subsidies? Grants?" Dr. Abbott hesitated, tapping his pen on the desk. "There's a charity that sometimes helps patients with rare diseases, but usually they support young people who have their whole lives ahead of them. However," he paused, "there is another option: clinical trials." "Clinical trials?" "Yes, a new drug, similar to the one we talked about. It's being developed by a pharmaceutical company out of Switzerland. They're looking for volunteers for Phase 3 trials. The treatment is free, but of course there are some risks. It is, after all, an experimental drug." I wondered. There were risks, of course. But wasn't my current life, with constant pain and progressive infirmity, an even greater risk? "I'd like to try it," I said firmly. "What is to be done?" Dr. Abbott smiled. "I knew you would say that. I've already requested the paperwork for you. You'll need to undergo an examination, fill out questionnaires. If you are approved, treatment can begin in as little as a month." That's how I became a participant in the clinical trial. Once a week, a car came to pick me up and take me to a medical center on the outskirts of Suffolk. There I was given injections, had tests taken, had tests done. It was tedious, sometimes painful, but I didn't complain. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was doing something for myself, that I was fighting, not just waiting for the end. And then what Dr. Abbott called a small miracle happened. After the third injection, the tremor in my hands was noticeably reduced. I could hold a cup of tea without spilling half of it. I could button my shirt without help. I could write, unevenly, with difficulty, but still write. "The results are encouraging," Dr. Abbott said, reviewing my tests. "Of course, it's not a cure. Parkinson's disease is incurable for now, but we can significantly slow its progression, improving your quality of life." "That's already more than I could have hoped for," I replied, barely holding back tears of gratitude. Along with the improvement in my physical condition came a change in my thinking. I began to reflect more on my life, on what was truly important, on what I was missing out on by chasing the ghosts of success and approval. Sitting in my chair by the window, I often thought of Eleanor, not with bitterness of loss as I had before, but with warm gratitude for the years we had spent together, her laughter, her patience, her wisdom. And I realized that I'd been happy with her, though I hadn't always realized it. I thought about Mercy, too, the little girl with the pigtails who once looked at me with adoration, about how she'd changed, grown up, distant. I didn't blame her anymore. No anger or resentment. only sadness that we couldn't keep the good things that had once been between us. One day, as I sat in the garden enjoying a rare, sunny day, Mrs. Parker approached me with a letter in her hand. "Thomas, this is for you, from the bank." I took the envelope, perplexed. All my bills were paid. I had no credit. What could the bank possibly want from me? The letter turned out to be from the probate department. My cousin, Harold Hackett, had died 3 months ago in Australia, and, as it turned out, left me a rather large sum of money, 100,000 Australian dollars. I was stunned. Harold and I hadn't spoken to each other for over 30 years. He had gone to Australia back in the 70s, married there, had children. We exchanged Christmas cards for the first few years, then that stopped too. "I didn't even know you had relatives in Australia," Mrs. Parker said when I shared the news with her. "We weren't particularly close," I replied. Harold was 10 years younger than me, my uncle's son. We only saw each other at family gatherings and rarely at that. "And he left you that amount of money? Why?" I shrugged. "I have no idea. Maybe he had no other heirs. Or maybe he remembered something good from our childhood." The letter included a contact number for the Australian lawyer handling Harold's estate. I called him the next day, with the help of Eleanor, who was better at international calls. The lawyer, Mr. Jenkins, confirmed that the inheritance was indeed intended for me. "Mr. Hackett mentioned you in the will quite explicitly," he said. "Thomas Hackett, my cousin from Suffolk, England. There can be no mistake." "But why?" I asked. "We haven't spoken to each other in decades." "He left a letter for you," Mr. Jenkins said. "I can send it along with the inheritance papers." The letter arrived 2 weeks later, a yellowed envelope with faded stamps. Inside was a sheet of paper written in large, sprawling handwriting I barely recognized. "Dear Thomas," Harold wrote, "if you're reading this, it means I'm gone. Don't be sad for me. I lived a good life. I had a loving wife. She died 5 years ago. 3 beautiful children who have long since grown up and moved around the world. I leave you this money in memory of that summer when I was 12 and you were 22. You probably don't remember, but my parents were getting a divorce. Terrible, messy business. They used me as a weapon against each other. I felt lost, unwanted, abandoned. And then you took me fishing, every day for 2 weeks. We sat by the river, we fished, we talked about everything. You listened to me, Thomas, really listened. No judgment, no unsolicited advice. You were just there for me when I needed you. Those 2 weeks changed my life. I realized I wasn't alone, that someone cared. It gave me the strength to get through my parents' divorce, to find my way. I always wanted to thank you, but I didn't know how. And then life got in the way and we lost touch. I hope this money will help you in your old age, make your life a little easier. Love, your cousin Harold." I sat holding the letter in my trembling hands and cried, not from grief, but from the realization of how a small kindness could change someone's life. I barely remembered those summers, those fishing trips. To me, it was just time spent with my younger cousin. To him, a lifeline in a sea of despair. The money from Harold changed my life. Now I could afford not only experimental treatments but also a full-time caregiver. A young woman named Iris, who came in the morning and left in the evening, helped with cleaning, cooking, administering medications, and accompanying me to treatments. Mrs. Parker and Eleanor still stopped by every day, but now their visits were a pleasure rather than an obligation. We played cards, watched old movies, sometimes just sat in the garden enjoying the warm summer days. Eleanor, who was due to leave in 2 weeks, decided to stay in Suffolk. "It's too noisy in Brighton," she said. "And here. It's nice here. It's quiet." I realized that she wasn't just staying because of Suffolk's quietness. A bond had formed between us, not a romantic one. We were too old for that. Rather, a deep friendship based on mutual respect and understanding. "You know, Thomas," she said one day as we sat in the garden watching the sunset, I never thought I'd find a new friend at my age. A real friend. Neither did I replied, covering her hand with mine. But life is full of surprises, isn't it? She smiled, the setting sun reflected in her eyes. Yes, and thank God for that. Mercy appeared in my life again at the end of the summer. No warning, no call. Just arrived one morning while Iris was helping me with breakfast. She looked tired, gaunt, nervously fiddling with the strap of her purse as she stood on the doorstep. "Daddy," she said without looking me in the eye. "Can I come in?" I nodded, stepping aside. She walked into the living room looking around as if expecting to see a change. But everything was the same as before. The same old pictures on the walls, the same worn chairs, the same TV in the corner. "You look better," she said, finally looking at me. "Healthier." "I feel better," I replied. "The new treatment is helping." "Treatment? That experimental one?" "Yes, I'm participating in a clinical trial. It's free." She nodded, lowering her eyes. "That's good. I'm happy for you." There was an awkward pause. We stood across from each other like strangers, not knowing what to talk about next. "I heard you got an inheritance," she said finally, "from some relative in Australia." Ah, that was it. That's why she'd come. New money, new inheritance. "Yes, from a cousin," I said. We hadn't spoken in years. It was unexpected. She nodded again, licking her lips nervously. "Dad, I wanted to apologize for everything that happened between us, for what I said, for what I did." I looked at her, trying to see the sincerity in her eyes, but all I saw was calculation. The cold, sober calculation of a woman who wants to regain a lost source of income. "Mercy," I said softly, "let's not lie to each other. You didn't come to apologize. You came for the money." She flared up. "That's not true. I really missed you. The kids missed you. Gareth, too." "Then why didn't you call? Didn't come to visit? Why did it take an inheritance from Harold to make you remember I existed?" She didn't answer, turning away to the window. Then she said quietly, "I thought you wouldn't want to see me, after everything that's happened. I've always wanted to see you, Mercy. You're my daughter, but I wanted to see you, not your greed." She turned, eyes glistening with tears. "That's not fair. I'm not greedy. I just wanted the best for my family. At the expense of my health, at the expense of my comfort, at the expense of my life." She was silent, biting her lip. Then she said, looking me straight in the eye, "I made a mistake, a terrible mistake, and I apologize. I sincerely do." I sighed. Maybe she really was remorseful. Maybe something had changed in her over the past few months. But trust, once broken, isn't easily rebuilt. "I accept your apology, Mercy," I said. "But that doesn't mean things can go back to the way they were. Too much has happened." "I understand," she nodded. "But maybe we could start over? Gradually? I could come over with the kids once a week. Just be a family." I looked at her face, so similar to Eleanor's, and felt conflicting emotions struggling inside. Part of me wanted to believe her, to give her another chance. The other part was screaming that this was another manipulation, another attempt to get at my money. "Mercy," I finally said, "I'm not closing the door for you, but I can't let you back into my life right away. I need time. And I need proof that you've really changed." "What proof?" She looked confused. "Real interest, real care, not for money or inheritance, but for me, for the sake of the relationship." She nodded slowly. "I understand that. I'm going to try to prove that I've changed, that I really do care." "Good," I said. "Then maybe you'd like to stay for lunch? Meet Iris, my nurse, and Eleanor, Mrs. Parker's sister?" Her face changed, becoming harder. "Mrs. Parker's sister, the same one to whom you left my house." "My house, Mercy, and I haven't changed my will. Yet." She gritted her teeth, clearly holding back anger. "I'm sorry, but I can't stay for lunch. I have a meeting, a business one, but I'll call you soon." And she left without giving me a hug, without really saying goodbye. Just walked out the door, got in her car, and drove away. I didn't believe she'd call. And I was right. A week, 2 weeks, a month passed. No call, no visit. Not from her, not from Gareth, not from the kids. But the strange thing is, it didn't hurt me anymore. It didn't hurt as much as it used to. I accepted it as fact, as a reality that couldn't be changed. And I focused on the things I could change: my health, my well-being, my relationships with people who really cared about me. The treatments continued to produce results. The tremors decreased enough that I was able to get back into wood carving, a hobby I had abandoned years ago. I started with simple things, small animal figures, jewelry boxes. Then I moved on to more complex projects. One day, Mrs. Parker, seeing my work, suggested a small exhibition at the local community center. "You have talent, Thomas," she said. "People need to see it." I agreed, though with some embarrassment. I wasn't used to putting my work on public display, but the exhibition was a success. A few figures were even bought, not for a lot of money, of course, but the very fact that someone liked what I had created with my own hands filled me with pride. As time went on, I appreciated more and more the peace and independence I had gained. No longer did I have to wait for Mercy's rare visits. No longer did I have to humiliate myself by asking for money for medication. I was the master of my life, as much as possible for an old, sick man. Sometimes, sitting in the garden with Eleanor, watching the sun go down, I thought about how strange everything had turned out. How loss, first of Eleanor, then of Mercy, had led to gain, new friends, new meaning, a new understanding of myself and the world. "What are you thinking about?" Eleanor asked one day, noticing my pensive look. "About life," I replied. "About how unpredictable it is, how what seems like the end is often the beginning of something new." She smiled, taking my hand. "Wise words, Thomas, very wise." And sitting there in the quiet garden, looking out at the sunset, surrounded by the care and warmth of people who had once been strangers but were now family, I felt a deep, quiet peace. The peace that comes with acceptance, with letting go of the past, with openness to the future, whatever it may be. I was free from toxic relationships, from manipulation, from guilt and obligation. And in that freedom, I found what I had been searching for all my life: inner peace. A peace that doesn't depend on external circumstances, on the approval of others, on conforming to other people's expectations. Maybe this is the wisdom of old age, in realizing that the true value of life is not in what you have or who you seem to be, but in who you really are, in being honest with yourself and others, in the ability to love and accept love, in the courage to be yourself, even if it means being alone. And I was no longer alone. I had people around me who saw me, the real me, not a source of money or obligation. People who cared for me, not out of a sense of obligation, but out of genuine affection. Perhaps someday Mercy will realize what she's lost, will realize that true wealth is not in money or possessions, but in relationships based on love and respect. But even if she never realizes, I will still find it in my heart to forgive her, not for her sake, but for my own. Because bitterness and resentment is too heavy a burden to carry for the rest of my life. In the meantime, I will live every day, every moment. I will rejoice in small victories, when I manage to walk across the room without a cane, when I manage to carve a particularly difficult figure, when the sun shines particularly bright. I will appreciate the people who are there for me and hold those who are gone in memory. And I will be grateful for this new chapter in my life, unexpected, unpredictable, but ultimately filled with meaning and peace.